James Harden will make his Sixers debut tomorrow night against the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's nothing new with the Philadelphia Flyers as they're yet again on another losing streak. And Fast Five, all that coming to you on Sports Talk Philadelphia. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. I'm your host for another week, Caleb Flieger, and I'm joined by my usual panel, Aidan Ciesinski, my co-producer. How are we doing, Aidan?
Doing well. Happy to be here, Caleb.
And Matt Dorenzo back for another episode. Matt?
I'm doing good. Good to be back.
Well, there hasn't been much in the Philadelphia sports world with the baseball lockout and obviously the Eagles not being there, but we are still going to bring you guys Sixers and Flyers today. We're going to jump right into Sixers as they had a very impressive win against the Milwaukee Bucks. The game right before the All-Star game, their last game of before the All-Star break. And they pulled one out, 123-120, being shorthanded after that James Harden trade. Joel Embiid showed why he's MVP of the league, 42 points, 14 rebounds. George Niang, very impressive performance, 18 points, 5 of 10 from 3, 50%. And Tyrese Maxey doing his usual thing of 19 points. Overall, it's just a very impressive win, coming off a very bad loss against the Boston Celtics, a game where against the Celtics was their largest loss of margin for the whole season. This looked awful overall, and they bounced back in a very good way against a very good team in the Milwaukee Bucks. Sixers now jump to the number 3 seed before the All-Star break. I just want to open up to you guys. How impressive was this win on the road, and overall just getting some momentum back going to the All-Star break?
So this one was huge for the Sixers, especially, Caleb, as you said, after that Celtics game. Another guy that needs a complete shout-out, Harris had 18 points as well, so the whole starting team outside of Thibault scored nearly 20 points. I do want to get into the Thibault issue, though, because he scored 0 points late, 1 rebound, and 1 assist. And that's not too good for a guy who was starting at the small forward position. They got a couple other guys that scored points. Niang obviously scored 18. You also had Korkmaz scored 13 points with 7 rebounds, and he was 3 for 4 for three-pointers. So those guys need to stepped up when they needed to. I think Thibault at this point is showing that he lacks that offense that you need to be a starter, and I think that he'll be better off the bench.
Yeah, this was a huge road win. Gives us a huge momentum shift going into the All-Star break, a huge momentum shift for the second half of the year. It's not often you go in and beat a team like that, defending NBA champions on the road. Milwaukee Bucks have been good for years. They have an MVP caliber in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Joel Embiid held them intact. Georgie Jang with 18 points in his first start in a while. Tyrese Maxey showing us how good he is. He had a few step-back threes. I guess he's learned from James Harden after all.
Yeah, the Sixers were struggling early in the Milwaukee Bucks game, but James Harden told George Niang, he said, just shoot some threes. He said, that's what you're best at. He said, at least try to get 10 up, and that's what George did, and he ended up making 5 of them and crucial into that Sixers victory as they only won by 3 points. We are going to jump to the Eastern Conference standings as that is very important now heading into this All-Star break. They are in 3rd place now. They were 5th last week, but with that win over the Bucks, boosts them up to the number 3 spot. Their current record is 35-23. They're still 2.5 games back from the Miami Heat, who are in 1st place. But the Sixers, who have not also played their other superstar, James Harden, yet, other acquisitions from the buyout market, the Sixers have been shorthanded this first half of the season. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Sixers can do for the rest of this stretch of games heading into the postseason.
I do think they can get the 1 seed by the end of the season. See, they're tied right now with 3rd with the Cavs. The Cavs are a young team. They've outshined what they're supposed to do this season. And with the addition of James Harden coming back from a hamstring injury this second half of the season, I do like the Sixers to jump up with him and Harden with 2 MVP power leading the way. I do think the Sixers can pass the Bulls and Heat for the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, so I'm going to hold that just a bit, Matt. I do think the Sixers have that shot at the 1 seed, but I need to see how they play in their next couple games. They have 3 coming up that are pretty easy, the 1 against the Timberwolves and then 2 against the Knicks. They also then have a 4-game stretch against the Cavs, Heat, Bulls, and then obviously that big game against the Nets. I want to see how they do in that 4-game stretch. They have 2 teams that are ahead of them. If they can win 3 out of those 4 big games, I think that they have a shot at that 1 seed. If they lose 1 or 2 of them, I think forget it.
It'll be very interesting, like Aidan just said, a lot of games against top-tier opponents in the Eastern Conference. So it's really going to show where the Sixers are at now after that acquisition of James Harden. I do think that the Sixers are going to be very good. I mean, you got to look at Joel Embiid's game with James Harden game. I don't think that you have 2 games that complement each other more than those 2 players. I mean, when you have 2 types of players that have that type of basketball IQ and their games just match together perfectly like that, I think the Sixers aren't going to have many issues trying to gel together as a team. I think they are going to get on a winning streak here, and I think they are going to get that number 1 seed by the postseason. So hopefully Sixers can get back to that number 1 spot in the Eastern Conference. The All-Star game was played this past Sunday, as we only did have one 76er in it, Joel Embiid. James Harden was ruled out for that game, but Joel Embiid showed out for Team Durant. He carried them as he had 36 points, 10 rebounds. He was the leading scorer in Team Durant. Team LeBron did win, though, 163 to 160 in a very close game. For those who don't know, the All-Star game, they do play to 162, so as soon as the team hits that, the game is over. But what was your guys' thoughts of watching Joel Embiid in that performance in the All-Star game? He really showed that he is one of the top players in the league.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing out of this whole thing is that Kevin Durant cannot pick an all-star team, apparently, because no one else besides Embiid scored over 20 points. So Embiid absolutely carried it. It's awesome to see someone who was the number 1 pick, who I feel like got snubbed last year for the MVP, play as well as he did and show that he is one of the best players in the NBA. At a very tough position at center, he's worked through so many injuries. He's worked through this whole Ben Simmons debacle. And I think that he's really showing the NBA, hey, I am up there with some of these other guys, such as Giannis and LeBron.
Yeah, the All-Star game was really fun to watch. Seeing Embiid thrive against the best of the best. And like Aidan said, Kevin Durant kept picking a team. The last 5 All-Star games, I think LeBron James is, 5-0 now at this point. Him with picking Steph Curry and Giannis. You saw there Curry with 50 points. Unbelievable. I know they're not playing defense in the All-Star game, but still, to make that many threes is really impressive.
Yeah, 16 made threes for Steph Curry. I'm pretty sure that's an All-Star game record for Steph Curry. He is the best shooter of all time. So overall, I thought it was just a great All-Star game. You got to see a lot of the stars that are around the league, and even the Rising Stars game, where you don't get to see as much of the young stars that are on the worst teams, like Cade Cunningham and players like that. So it was just overall great All-Star game weekend. I do want to bring up real quick the dunk contest. There is a lot of controversy. That is probably one of the worst dunk contests that have happened in NBA history. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, in years prior to the dunk contest, with Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon, they were awesome to watch. Back in the day with Vince Carter. Nowadays, it just feels like it's forced. It's not as fun as it used to be. The players and the audience isn't getting engaged as they used to be. And I think going forward, the NBA really needs to look into that.
Yeah, I think they just need to get rid of it altogether. I mean, at this point, the best players that are the best dunkers, John Morant hasn't participated really in his career at all. Some of these other guys haven't, and you're seeing some of the skills that they're doing just aren't that good. Like the one guy for the Warriors, who, again, I don't even know who he is because he wasn't well known before the dunk contest. He dunked over Andrew Wiggins, who's 6'7". There's been guys that have dunked over like Shaq, who's like 7'2", or Yao Ming, who's 7'6". I don't want to see a guy dunk over a small forward. I want to see guys that like Blake Griffin jumping over a car. That's what I want to see in the dunk contest. If you're not going to do that, just get rid of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was Diallo 2 years back where he jumped over Shaquille O'Neal. So definitely there was a lot more impressive dunks in the past. So definitely below par this year. So hopefully the NBA can get a guy like John Morant in the dunk contest next year, because we can really see how he can fly in there. So we are going to jump to some potential buyout players for the Sixers, as the buyout market has occurred currently. 76ers did sign Willie Cauley Stein to a 10-day contract. He was previously on the Dallas Mavericks this season, actually. I think he got cut around end of December. Cauley Stein, he's averaging 1.9 points per game, 2.1 rebounds per game, but he's a 7-footer, and that's something that the Sixers are very lacking now that Andre Drummond did get traded to the Brooklyn Nets. The Sixers' current backup center is Paul Millsap, who I think is 6'7". So Sixers are definitely lacking in height when Joel Embiid is not on the court. What was your guys' kind of overall reaction to signing Willie Cauley Stein? Kind of an NBA veteran at this point in his career. Definitely a guy that can be a defensive force in the paint for the Sixers.
I feel like that this is like the perfect backup center for the Sixers. And this is something that Daryl Morey has done a great job for Embiid, is getting these veteran centers who know the game and have been in playoff situations and can really step up in those situations when Embiid just needs like a quick 5 to 10 minute break. I think that this is a perfect fit. I hope the Sixers extend that contract in the playoffs because they're desperately going to need it going forward.
Yeah, I really like the signing. You needed that backup center position desperately with the loss of Andre Drummond. Somebody just come in and give Embiid that well-needed breather. And he's 7-footer. He's really athletic. Him playing off James Harden or Tyrese Maxey, it'll be a great addition to the Sixers team.
Yeah, Goran Dragic, who was probably one of the top buyout players in the market. He was a point guard. He did sign with the Brooklyn Nets. So obviously another great addition for the Brooklyn Nets there. Their depth, I would say, is a lot better than the Sixers currently. So Sixers should keep their eye on the buyout market and definitely keep their eye on a few players. I did see that Gary Harris, a shooting guard for the Orlando Magic currently, he's averaging around 10.5 points per game. He could possibly be bought out by the Orlando Magic. He's currently shooting, he's a 40% three-point shooter. In the corner threes, he's like over 47%. So what type of do you think that shooting presence is something the Sixers need if he becomes available?
Yeah, so if he is available, and that is the biggest question here, I think they should throw him an offer. Because with his addition to the bench, we need scoring is three-point shooting is now the focus point in the NBA this season, and you can never have too many shooters coming off the bench.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that, which is why I think that another option, if they can't get Gary Harris, should be DJ Augustine. I get it. He's only played 38 games this year. He's only averaging 5.4 points per game. But he's also a 38% three-point shooter in his career, which is something the Sixers don't really have at the backup point guard position, is a good three-point shooter. So I think that if either one of those guys are available, the Sixers should absolutely bite and get one of them.
Yeah, hopefully some players become available for the Sixers. But if players don't become available for the Sixers, we have to roll with the options we have now. Obviously, we saw in the Milwaukee Bucks game, Furkan Korkmaz had 13 points off the bench, a pretty impressive performance for him, but he's been shaky throughout this season so far. What is one player off the bench that you guys think needs to really step up in this last stretch of games towards the postseason that could really help the Sixers' depth on the bench and just a little more consistency in scoring?
Yeah, honestly, Korkmaz is a great answer. I also think that Thibault needs to start shooting better. Because he is such a great defensive player that the Sixers need to have him either start or if he's coming off the bench, get major minutes. And if he can't score, then we're just going to have to take him out. Same thing that happened to Ben Simmons. And at that point, he becomes a reliability that you just can't have on the court. And it's going to be something that the Sixers are going to have to work through and see if either he can produce or if they need other players.
A player I like to get good solid minutes is Shake Milton. He came back from injury before the All-Star break. He showed promise. I think if he gathers what we know he can do, we've seen him be that leader in the point guard position. If he can do that, I think would be great going towards postseason.
Yeah, the Sixers do have a few players on the bench that kind of need to step up and show more consistency for the Sixers to really be a contender this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Sixers' depth position here. We are going to jump to the Sixers are playing the Minnesota Timberwolves tomorrow night, their first game back from the All-Star break. Good news for Sixers fans, the long wait is over as James Harden will make his 76ers debut. A potential starting lineup that people are thinking that the Sixers will have is Tyrese Maxey starting a point guard, James Harden, possibly Matisse Thybulle, but like Aidan's been saying, he's been really struggling on the offensive end. Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid. The 76ers have 24 games left in the regular season until the postseason to get that #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And the Timberwolves are 31-28 on the season, 7th in the Western Conference, so they're currently in a play-in game. Obviously, they have Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards. So they do have a lot of scorers on that team and a lot of threats on that team. But obviously, the big news is James Harden is making his Sixers debut finally. With that starting lineup question, I personally think that they should put Danny Green in that lineup instead of Matisse Thybulle, just because of the fact with James Harden on the floor and Joel Embiid on the floor at the same time, all the eyes they take and all the pressure they take from other players, we need shooters on the court and people who can score. Having Matisse Thybulle on the court, yeah, he's a great defensive presence for the Sixers. But is he going to knock down those threes when James Harden drives to the paint and dishes out to the wing? I think Danny Green has a lot more chance of making those threes, and he is a player that needs to step up because he got signed to a 2-year contract worth $15 million, and I haven't seen any amount of money been worth it this year from Danny Green. So he's a player that I think the Sixers should start, and he is someone that needs to step up with James Harden in the lineup.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really excited to see James Harden play. I have felt this way since we actually acquired Jimmy Butler. Remember when the Eagles got Jay Ajayi in the offseason. I do expect a slow start from this 5 because, as anybody happens, and they've never played together. But as the heat of the game goes on, the prime of the game goes on, I do think this team will perform, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Harden as well. Caleb, you know that I just can't stand Danny Green on the court. I don't want to see him starting. He only scored 2 points in the last game, went like 0 for 4 for 3. I just don't want to see him in. I would rather see Korkmaz in because he scored 13 points and got 7 rebounds. That could be a great presence with Harden as well, and it could really open up the court. I'm so excited to see Harden with Embiid. I feel like that the pick and rolls you can run off that would be awesome. I feel like that Embiid can also get open for 3 as well. I think it's just going to be an awesome game.
Yeah, a guy that we did talk about earlier in the show, Willie Cauley Stein, he should get relative good minutes in tomorrow night's game. I mean, he did only get signed to a 10-day contract, so he's really got to prove to the 76ers why to keep him during these 10 days. A player like him can very easily succeed off of James Harden play because we know James Harden loves to throw lobs, and Willie Cauley Stein is a 7-footer who has great hands like that. So I can see Cauley Stein having a great impact on these next few games while he's with the Sixers. And hopefully they sign him for the remainder of the season because, like we said earlier, the Sixers are very lacking a 7-foot big man in the lineup. Well, that's all we have for 76ers so far. We will get back to you guys next week with the James Harden news. Hopefully it's a great debut for James Harden, as it's been a long wait for these. I mean, it's only been a week, but still feels like it's been an eternity waiting for this. So definitely going to be exciting to see two superstar players on the same court together. We are going to jump to the Philadelphia Flyers, as there's not much new to talk about there, as they are on yet another losing streak, 6-game losing streak so far. Their current record is 15, 26, and 10. The Flyers, they were on that huge losing streak. I mean, they've been on multiple double-digit losing streaks this season, but I think the previous one was around 13 games, was the longest in franchise history. They did break that, and they went on a 2-game winning streak, and then they hopped right back on the losing streak train and lose 6 straight against the Red Wings twice, the Penguins, the Capitals, the Hurricanes, the Blues. And if you look at a lot of these games, many of them aren't very close besides those 2 overtime games. So it is kind of worry that the Flyers aren't even being competitive in these games. And where do you guys think the Flyers can go from here?
Well, I think what's really interesting about the Flyers is the fact that they haven't been a good team the last 2 years. They made it to the Western Conference Finals, but in the last 10 to 50 years, they've never gone through a full rebuild. They've just gone through a retool with a lot of veteran players. And at this point, I think this Flyers should really think about just tearing it all down and going through rebuild. You have a couple of good young players. You have Joel Farabee, who was hurt for an entire month and now will be coming back, which would be huge for them. And they have a couple other young guys as well. But I think you just have to get rid of the old guys, put them on contenders, and just go bottom top, see if maybe you can win the next couple of years.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it any better. The Flyers with Claude Giroux, I did hear rumors that he does want to be traded to a contender, and after all his years here, I would like to see him succeed. And the last 2 losses to Flyers, back-to-back at home, they played better than I thought they would. I watched that Hurricanes game, the overtime loss. They're one of the best teams in the league. The Flyers kept competitive all game, and I really hope they can end the season with that on a good note and then look forward to the offseason for a rebuild. Yeah,
there hasn't been a lot of bright spots on the Flyers this season, but one of the bright spots has been their veteran Claude Giroux. He won All-Star Game MVP this season. I mean, he's obviously just been the #1 scorer for the Flyers this season and continued to show his consistency through his career with the Flyers. Matt did say that he would probably likely be traded to a contender after this offseason. Where do you guys think his trade value is at? Do you think it's kind of high, medium? Because he is kind of getting older now.
I would see it as, I think it's still up there for a veteran leader who's, like you said, just won All-Star Game MVP. He was an All-Star. He's been around for as many years as I can remember. I do think teams would love to have that leadership underneath their wings for going for a title push.
Yeah, my biggest concern with that is it might not be as high as the Flyers think, only because the Flyers are so bad that teams will realize that they're desperate to get rid of these veteran guys who just don't want to be there. So we might not get as much in return as we're hoping for. If we get a lot, it would be great, like a couple of draft picks. That would be awesome. I just don't know if that's just going to happen with this one.
Yeah, and obviously there's been a lot of disappointment this season with the Philadelphia Flyers. A lot of people thought this was the year to go back to the playoffs and really make that contending push, but it obviously wasn't this season. Where do you guys think was your biggest disappointment throughout this season so far?
I think the biggest disappointment for me has been Travis Konechny. He was a guy that was averaging 25 goals a game, which was awesome from the first 3 years in the league. And then he really dipped off. He's played 49 games and only scored 8 goals as a center, which you cannot have for a guy that's supposed to be scoring a lot of your goals for you, especially with Joel Farabee hurt. And that's just been a huge concern for me and a big reason why the Flyers aren't contending.
I just think overall the whole team's a disappointment. Coming off 2 years ago, the #1 seed for conference, a young team looking for the future, had all the pieces right there to go win a championship, and now fighting for the last pick, for the first pick in the draft, the last seed overall. I mean, I just really don't know where it went wrong.
Yeah, and obviously there was a lot of young talent on this team, and a lot of them just kind of plateaued and never really made that next jump that a lot of Flyers fans thought they were going to make. And I think one of these guys is Carter Hart, where he had that spectacular rookie season to start the year and kind of fell off a tad bit. Didn't really go to that next level that a lot of people thought he'd go to. Is he another player that you guys think could be on the move after this season? Because obviously the Flyers kind of need a whole rebuild here.
I don't think you can move on from just yet. I mean, it's not very often you have a really good young goalkeeper in the NHL, and if the Flyers move for him, then they're really going into that panic rebuild, and I think we should keep him around for a few more seasons just to see where he can take us.
I agree that it might be too soon, but at the same point, he only had one great year, and then now two just mediocre or bad years. And I get that the defense hasn't been great as well, and it honestly has been very lackluster and a big reason why he's not being as successful goalie. But at the same point, how long can we say, hey, we should hold on to him because he had one great year? Because at a certain point, you have to say, hey, if we're going to go fully into this rebuild, that means everyone that's been hurting our team and dragging us to the bottom has to go, and it might start with the goalie.
Yeah, it feels like a little bit of Carson Wentz controversy with Carter Hart here. Had that one good season and then kind of plateaued a little bit. But we are going to jump to the Metropolitan Division standings. Flyers fans may not want to look at this, but the Flyers are currently 7th place in the Metropolitan. Obviously, the season is over. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. Like Matt said, they're fighting for that #1 overall pick that a lot of Flyers fans are probably looking at mock drafts already, looking at who we can get. Obviously, the Flyers, you guys think they're going to finish last? Obviously, at this point in the season, you got to be pushing for that #1 overall pick.
Yeah, I definitely think that they have to. It's so interesting, though, that them and the Devils are 1 point with each other for the last place in the Metropolitan. I don't know who's going to finish first. The Islanders have also picked it up a little bit, but they were on a super long losing streak as well. So it seems like there's like 3 teams, including the Flyers, that could get that #1 seed.
As the Flyer fan I am, Philly fan I am, I don't want them seeing them to get dead last. But for the future, it might be the best it might be the best case scenario for us as a team. But the way they've been playing the last few games, competitive against the Hurricanes and the Blues, 2 playoff teams, I do think they would finish a few points above the Devils.
And the Flyers, they don't have a lot of youth in the systems below them on the Phantoms and teams such as that. So getting a high overall pick and getting some youth in the Flyers organization may be something the Flyers need. And trading a guy like Claude Giroux and maybe getting some young players in return or some draft picks may be the right decision for the Flyers moving forward. The Flyers' next game is this upcoming Saturday against the Washington Capitals. The Capitals are 4th in the Metropolitan currently. They're 28-15-9 on the season, so pretty much the opposite of what the Flyers' record is. Where do you guys? This game is in Philadelphia. Any chance the Flyers pull this one out and end this 6-game losing streak?
No, I don't think so. At this point, the wins come more often. The wins, you're surprised when they happen. And against a good team with the Capitals, led by Alex Ovechkin, I just don't see the Flyers have standing a chance.
All right, I'm going to be optimistic here and go with yes, only because Joel Farabee's coming back after like a month. Might add a little bit of spark to that Flyers offense that's been kind of struggling a bit. I think that they can pull this one out.
The Flyers have been a disappointment, but hopefully they can turn things around and get back in the win column this upcoming Saturday against the Washington Capitals. That's all we got for the Flyers, as we are going to move into Fast 5. Our first question is this week in college basketball with Aidan Sasinski.
Yeah, so obviously every college basketball fan is talking about what happened with Juwan Howard, but that whole thing is just taking away from great basketball that's been happening in the last couple of weeks. One of the best teams out of the Power 5 that are leading right now is Duke. They're currently top 5 in the country. It's Mike Krzyzewski's last year as a head coach for them, and 3 of their conference losses, which are 3 of their 4 losses total, have all come in 1-possession games, and their only loss outside the conference was to number 22 Ohio State, 71-66. So they've been playing awesome this year. It's great to see after last year they missed the NCAA tournament and was really a disappointment. Most people thought that Coach K wouldn't be able to make it back. He's really turned it around this year. He's some great young players. So I'm excited to see Duke along with another blue-collar team, Kansas, back in the tournament this year.
It would definitely be great to see Coach K go out on a high note, as he's had probably one of the best coaching careers in college basketball history. Next question, we are going to go to Matt for this one. What is the best professional sport all-star game?
See, when I think of the All-Star game, I think the weekend as a whole. And I have between MLB or NBA. The MLB with the home run derby along the All-Star game. I know years prior they used to play the All-Star game for home field advantage in the World Series. And the NBA with the three-point contest, the skills competition, and the disappointing dunk contest. But as in years prior, that has been good. I think overall, I think it's between those 2 sports right there.
I completely agree. I think the NFL is just completely out of that question, as they weren't even tackling each other in this past game. So people think the NBA doesn't play any defense. Well, the NFL doesn't even tackle each other. So there you go. We're going to go back to Aidan, best team currently in the NHL.
Yeah, so it'd be really easy to go with the Avalanche, who's the best team in the entire NHL record-wise, although they play in a super weak Western Conference compared to the East. So I'm going to go with the best team in the East, the Florida Panthers. They currently have 3 players with 20-plus goals, And they have Sergei Bobrovsky, who's one of the best goalies in the NHL. He's currently 26-5-3 as a record. He has a 91.7 save percentage. He's third in wins and 10th in save percentage with goalies that have played 30-plus games. I think that the Panthers can make a great run through the East, maybe make it to the finals this year.
Yeah, next question, going back to Matt. In the All-Star game this past Sunday, Chris Paul did make an appearance, and he did fracture his thumb, and is now expected to be out 6 to 8 weeks, which will rule him out basically the rest of the regular season. He will be back for the postseason, though. The Suns are currently the #1 seed in the Western Conference by 6.5 games. Matt, do you think this hurts the Suns' chances at all?
Obviously it does. Chris Paul's a great leadership. He's a great point guard. But I think they'll do just fine. They have a good, comfortable lead right now over the Warriors for the #1 seed in the Western Conference. And then Devin Booker leading the way, scoring the points. And Aidan right beside him. I think the Suns will do just fine.
Yeah, I think they will be just fine too. But obviously, every time it seems like Chris Paul has a contending team in his hands, it seems like every time he gets hurt, you look back to the Houston days when he was with James Harden. They were up 3-1 on the Warriors. He hurt his hamstring. They ended up losing that series. You look at last year, I think he had another hamstring or concussion. Obviously, just the injury bug keeps coming Chris Paul's way, and it's sad to see, but hopefully he makes a good postseason push and gets the Suns back to the finals like he did last year. Our last question, we are going to go to Juwan Howard, was suspended for 5 games after a scuffle against the University of Wisconsin. For those who don't know, Michigan was taking on Wisconsin in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was up around 13, 15 points on Michigan. They called a late timeout with about 10 seconds, 15 seconds left. Obviously, Juwan Howard was not very pleased with what happened. So when they were going through the line shaking hands, Juwan Howard got a little heated debate with the head coach there and ended up hitting one of the coaches. So overall, I think it's a very weak move by the NCAA by only giving the Wisconsin coach a $10,000 fine and Juwan Howard 5 games. First of all, the Wisconsin coach started that whole thing. I mean, Juwan Howard was walking by him in the line, just said, "I'll remember this." He had to stop him. He had to put his hands on him first, started the whole thing. So I think overall, just at NCAA, I thought it was pitiful the way they handled it. For those calling for Juwan Howard to get fired, you're crazy, and I don't think you should be watching college basketball. So that's all we have for Fast 5 this week. I appreciate you guys for coming through and watching again. Don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram at SportsTalk LTV. And that's all we have for this week, and we'll be back next Thursday with you guys. Thanks again.